How old are Kirk and Spock in Star Trek? Strange New Worlds Season 3. The Star Trek timeline has always been a fascinating puzzle of stardates, character arcs, and subtle continuity tweaks. One of the most intriguing aspects of Star Trek Strange New Worlds is the way it explores familiar legacy characters, particularly James T. Kirk and Spock, before their iconic adventures aboard the Enterprise in the original series. As Season 3 approaches, fans can't help but ask, just how old are Kirk and Spock supposed to be at this point in the timeline? The answer reveals both the precision and flexibility of Star Trek canon, and it also highlights how Strange New Worlds is building toward their legendary friendship, placing Strange New Worlds in the timeline. Strange New Worlds begins in 2259, with Captain Christopher Pike leading the Enterprise and Spock serving as his science officer. By Season 3, the series should be set in the early 2260s, about 5 years before Captain Kirk officially takes command of the Enterprise in the original series. This puts us squarely in a transitional period of Star Trek history, when both Kirk and Spock are still finding their footing as officers in Starfleet. Unlike later captains like Picard or Janeway, whose careers unfold mostly in real time, Kirk and Spock have a more complicated chronology because their ages and backstories were pieced together retroactively across films, TV shows, and reference materials. Still, the canonical dates give us a fairly solid answer. How old is James T. Kirk in Strange New Worlds Season 3? James Tiberius Kirk was born on March 22, 2233, in Riverside, Iowa, a date cemented by multiple Star Trek references and celebrated by fans as Kirk's birthday. That means by the time Strange New Worlds Season 3 rolls around in the early 2260s, Kirk is around 29 or 30 years old. This makes sense with how the show portrays him. Paul Wesley's version of Kirk is still young, ambitious, and occasionally brash. He's a decorated officer already, with a reputation for cleverness and risk-taking, but he's not yet the captain who will define Starfleet's golden age of exploration. Instead, Strange New Worlds shows him as a rising star, commanding the USS Farragut and gaining the experience that will prepare him for the Enterprise. It's worth noting that by the start of the original series in 2265, Kirk is only 32 years old. That's remarkably young for someone commanding a Constitution-class starship, but it emphasizes his brilliance, charisma, and potential. Strange New Worlds Season 3 bridges the gap, showing the final steps in Kirk's evolution from promising officer to future legend. How old is Spock in Strange New Worlds Season 3? Spock's age is a little trickier to pin down, because Vulcan lifespans extend for centuries. However, his canonical birthday is 2230, which makes him about 32 years old in Season 3 of Strange New Worlds. This means Spock is slightly older than Kirk, but still relatively young by Vulcan standards. At just 3 decades old, Spock is really still in the early stages of life, equivalent to a human in their mid-20s. Vulcans are expected to live well over 200 years, so his current struggles with logic, emotion, and identity are perfectly aligned with his development. Ethan Peck's portrayal leans into this younger, more conflicted Spock. He hasn't yet fully embraced the stoicism of Leonard Nimoy's version, and he's still learning how to reconcile his Vulcan and human sides. His relationships, both romantic and professional, highlight the tension of being caught between two worlds. At 32, he's already brilliant, but he's not yet the unshakable science officer fans know from TOS. The Kirk-Spock dynamic in the making. The fact that Kirk is 29 and Spock is 32 in Season 3 is more than trivia. It's crucial to understanding their evolving relationship. Despite their similar ages, they're at very different stages of maturity. Kirk's boldness contrasts with Spock's cautious logic, and Strange New Worlds gives us a glimpse of how these differences will eventually create one of Star Trek's greatest partnerships. By the time TOS begins, their friendship is already legendary. But Season 3 of Strange New Worlds offers something unique: the chance to see that friendship take root. Knowing their ages makes these interactions even more poignant, because we're watching two young officers, both still figuring themselves out, forge a bond that will shape the future of Starfleet. Why their ages matter in the story. Age has always been a subtle storytelling tool in Star Trek. Pike's looming fate is tied to his years of experience. Kirk's youth emphasizes his brilliance, but also his recklessness. Spock's age, compared to his people, underscores his struggle with maturity and identity. By spotlighting their exact ages in Season 3, Strange New Worlds reminds us that these characters aren't yet icons, they're still growing. Kirk hasn't yet faced the Kobayashi Maru, and Spock hasn't yet pledged himself fully to logic. Their youth allows the series to explore them as fallible, vulnerable, and relatable.